everyone, welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. So today I want to share with you the latest announcement by Original Jazz Classics, which is a subsidiary of Kraft Recordings, for their release calendar for the rest of 2024. So I'm also going to quickly remind you some of the titles that they actually just announced back in March as well, which takes us through, I want to say, August. So that was the last time that we heard from OJC. They've sort of been bleeding their calendar out in pieces. And anyway, like I said, on June 18th, we just found out the releases through the end of the year. So that's what we're going to talk about. So please go ahead and hit like on this video. If this is your first time here, you can hit subscribe. You can also head over to Instagram and follow me. I'm at what_can_brown. So really quick, the last time that I addressed the release calendar by OJC, again, was back in March, and I want to just rattle off a few of those just for a few reasons. One is that a few of them are still coming up, and so, you know, those are going to be like, you know, releases that you're going to see in the stores and on online sooner. But also, there's like a weird thing going on with one of them, and that one was released on April 26th, and that's Red Garland's Groovy. So the weird thing that's happening with this one is that it's disappeared from OJC's website. You still can get it, it looks like, through websites like Target, like Acoustic Sounds, like the In Groove, I believe it's available. So there's still places to get it, but it's just kind of a weird thing that I noticed. And it felt to me like when that was released, there was a ton of really positive like comments about the release. And so it's weird that it's kind of like disappeared for some reason. So anyway, maybe more to come on that. And maybe it's temporary, right? Maybe it's like temporarily out of stock or something. Anyway, the next one was Kenny Burrell and John Coltrane's Self-Titled, which came out on June 7th. There is also John Wright's South Side Soul coming up on June 28th. And if you'll remember my video that I did last time that they made an announcement, this was the one that I was most excited about. I do have an original pressing, but still, it's such a solid record, and that one's coming up real soon. And the last one that they announced was Miles Davis's Self-Titled, simply Miles, on Prestige. So this one originally had an end of July release date, and that was pushed. In fact, a few of these that I've referenced, the release dates were pushed from the original announcement. So I guess we're going to have to see what happens with some of these titles that are coming up in terms of whether they can stick to the release dates that they're promising, at least for now. So yeah, with that sort of refresher, let's dive into the newest announcement. All right, so if you're not familiar with Original Jazz Classics, they're, again, a subsidiary of Kraft Recordings. This is dusting off a brand from like the early 80s. I want to say they started putting out stuff in like 83 or so. And what Kraft Recordings is doing with this sort of revamped brand is they're doing all analog, so AAA pressings, lacquers cut from the original master tapes by either Kevin Gray or Matthew Luthans at Coherent Audio. They're being put out on 180 gram. They're pressed at RTI. They do have tip-on jackets. And one of the interesting things is that they seem to be taking an especially, so they're paying especially close attention to some of the elements of the original jackets. So what I mean by that is that they put out Bill Evans's Sunday at the Village Vanguard in a textured cover, which is very nice, and it very closely resembles that original. And so this is especially important because there actually is a title coming up in this, on this release calendar that also originally had a textured jacket. And so sort of, for the nerds that are out there, it's sort of like fingers crossed to see whether they're actually going to represent that again as well. All right, so the first one in this latest announcement that's coming out, coincidentally or not coincidentally, on the same release date as that Miles Davis one that I just referenced, August 30th. So we'll see if they stick to it. But in any event, In Orbit by Clark Terry with Thelonious Monk is coming out on August 30th as well. So this album was originally recorded in 1958. You've got Sam Jones on bass, Philly Joe Jones on drums, Clark Terry just on flugelhorn, not on trumpet, and Thelonious Monk on piano. So all indications, even though OJC has not been 100% clear in their announcement, all indications are that this title is going to be released in mono. In fact, it was not originally released in stereo at all, which makes me wonder if some of the later stereo reissues are even stereo. But in any event, all indications are that this reissue is going to be mono. The last time this was put out in the US, I believe was in 1988, also by the previous iteration of OJC. So I think it's about time that we get another release of this. As far as the content goes, you'd like to think that it's all Thelonious Monk tunes, but actually there's 5 originals by Clark Terry, just 1 by Thelonious Monk here, so it isn't just the band sort of playing Monk tunes at all. Highlights here for me, I would say that the number one highlight is actually the title track, In Orbit, which is it's a Clark Terry original. It's super fast paced, really nice solo by Clark Terry, whose flugelhorn tone is like that kind of warm and just beautiful thing. Really great solo by Thelonious Monk here as well. If I had to pick another, it would be the track One Foot in the Gutter, which I also think, is a Clark Terry original. So in any event, I think this is one to look out for. It's one that I'm excited about. I do have a clean original, so maybe I'll wait and hear how others think how it sounds before I order it, but we'll see. So I mentioned that there was one of these albums that they have the opportunity to address the textured cover, and that title is Mal Waldron's The Quest. This is slated for September 27th. Believe they are putting it out in mono. Out of this latest announcement, similar to how like last time Southside Soul was like clearly number one for me in terms of the most excited I was for the release, this time it's definitely The Quest. I think this is one, maybe even surpasses Southside Soul in terms of my excitement for it this year. So this album was originally released in 1962, and in the lineup here you have Eric Dolphy, Joe Benjamin, Ron Carter, Charles Persip, Booker Ervin, and of course, Mal Waldron. This also was not originally released in stereo, and so again, I do believe that they're putting this out in mono. This title has been available periodically. In fact, it even had some like 70s reissues with a completely different, kind of very 70s flavored cover. But to my understanding, there's been no all analog reissues since possibly 1983, and that was an OJC release OJC edition by George Horn, who was the mastering engineer. So the content here is definitely more adventurous music, and I think if you're familiar with Mal Waldron, maybe that sort of delivers on your expectations. Certainly more adventurous than In Orbit, the one we just talked about. So remember, you do have folks like Mal Waldron and Eric Dolphy, especially here, who are experimenting quite a bit in terms of both in terms of harmonically, but they're also messing with like atonality and less established rhythm and chord progressions, things like that. Ron Carter is on here as well. And as I mentioned, and he plays some like kind of frenetic bowing here that offers not only sort of melodic solos, but also sort of quasi-rhythmic ones. And so the interesting thing here is that, the bass duties are actually provided by Joe Benjamin, and Ron Carter's playing cello here, not bass. So I think he's freed up in terms of necessarily playing the changes, and is a little bit more anchoring into some of the experimental nature, which I think makes one of the things that makes this album really stand out. So the highlight above all else for me on this album is a track called Warm Canto. And I'm going to be so bold as to say that I think it's one of the most beautiful tracks that's ever been recorded, and I do mean ever been recorded. It's very sort of somber, but again beautiful, and I think you have to hear it. It's not what you'd expect if you're thinking about sort of jazz kind of sounding piece. It feels a little bit more classical if we're gonna like throw labels at it, but it's just so beautiful, and I encourage everyone to check it out. So again, for me, not just for Warm Canto, but for the whole album, I think that this is the one that I'm like most excited about. And if you had asked me last year, even the year before, what I wanted them to release most on OJC entirely across all titles that they could, it would be The Quest. So very excited that it's finally being included. All right, the next one, Thelonious Monk Septet, and this is Monk's Music. This is coming out on October 25th. And I do believe all indications are that it's in mono, and that's important. And I'll get into the reason in just a second. So this album was originally released in 1957. The lineup, it includes Gigi Grice, you got Wilbur Ware, Art Blakey, Coleman Hawkins, John Coltrane, Ray Copeland, and of course, Thelonious Monk. So So the mono element here. So this was recorded both in mono and stereo in that original, obviously like at the time. But those recordings were done with different mics. And this has caused some controversy because the two recordings sound very different between the mono and the stereo, just in terms of, I mean, obviously it's the same music and it's being performed simultaneously, but there was actually a recording error during the session where I want to say like the stereo mic cut out or there was some problem with it. Can't remember if they address it in the liner notes, or I think they just did sort of retrospectively if it was Orrin Keep News or somebody like that. But in any event, why that's a problem is because on the stereo they had to omit one of the tracks that was originally on the mono. And that track is Crepuscule with Nelly. Is that how you pronounce that word? I think it's like Crepuscule with Nelly. So the mono edition has 6 tracks on it, and every stereo edition, to my knowledge, has had 5, unless they bring in a mono version of that last track into the stereo recording, which they might have done on some of the reissues. So this is one that we've needed in mono in order to get all of the tracks, in order to get the complete album. I would say that overall this album has had more reissues than any other on this list, and there's actually 3 recent editions that were all pressed from the original master tapes in the last 12 months alone. So this is like weird. This is like weird timing. So the first was on the very unaffordable Electric Recording Company label, and that was presented in mono. It was about a year ago. The second one was by Vinyl Me Please in stereo. I made a video about this like not that long ago. But like I said, it's in stereo, and so it's missing a track. But this does sound great. It's actually a really nice presentation. And then the third reissue was like last month by Analog Productions, when they were announcing that they weren't like remastering, but they were repressing a run of like their mono copies that they had done some years ago. So like, ain't that a kick in the balls that the AP is doing that like a few weeks before Kraft's own announcement for their mono. So in any event, we're getting a mono by OJC, but here, let's be real. Amazing album. You've got a number of horns on here between Gigi Grice and Coleman Hawkins and Ray Copeland and John Coltrane. It's great music. It's an iconic album. It's a great cover that what's his name? It's Paul Bacon did for Riverside. It's the complete package, and I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. If you jumped for any of those previous recent editions, like I did with the stereo, not knowing that any of this was going to happen, I don't know what to tell you. But if you want the entire album, you got to get a mono copy. All right, so the next one is Blue Mitchell's Blues Moods. So this is being put out on November 15th, and it is being presented in stereo. This is a title that I own a copy of. I own a Japanese copy of. I don't know where it is. I spent too long just now looking for it, and I figured I might as well press on here. So, but I know I have it. This is a title that has just always been impossible to get, at least for me. So I've never owned anything close to an original copy. So like a 70s Japanese reissue, I want to say. This was originally put out in 1960. It was released in mono only in the US, and then apparently stereo simultaneously in Japan, but no stereos in the US until OJC put one out in 1984. Original monos, like US monos, go for upwards of $400. It's just always been out of reach for me. So on this album, and really the reason for why it's so expensive is because it has a fantastic lineup, but it's really great music. So you've got Sam Jones on bass, Roy Brooks on drums, Wynton Kelly on piano, and then Blue Mitchell, obviously on trumpet. So in terms of other editions that you'd be able to get if you weren't going for some of these early ones, there was a 2004 edition by Analog Productions, which was put out in 45 RPM format. Never heard that one. And the weird thing too is that all of these reissues have been in stereo. And I say all of them, it's like there's been many, but many of the reissues have been in stereo. Don't ask me what happened to the original mono tapes, no clue, but we're getting another one in stereo. So I personally, as a trumpet player, and I've just been a longtime fan of Blue Mitchell, I'm a huge fan of this um, this early album by Blue Mitchell. It's stark with just that single horn plus rhythm section. Just really nice stuff, especially the opener, I'll Close My Eyes. I think it highlights Blue Mitchell's tone really, really well. I personally think that, and I listened to this, I streamed it to sort of refamiliarize myself with the material. I think that this is going to be one of the best sounding releases in the series. Like, I can almost guarantee it. It was so well recorded originally by Ray Fowler. A lot of stark stuff in here. There's some like areas where it's just bass and trumpet that's going to sound really great. And I just think from like a sonic perspective, like this is all the hallmarks that it's going to be really, really nice. Probably a lot of space around the instruments and like that kind of thing. So I'm really excited. And again, because I have a reissue that may have not been sourced from the original master tapes, I'm not sure. I'm very interested to hear how this one sounds because I've never been able to own an original. All right, so the last title in the announcement is Cal Tjader's Latin Kick. This is being put out on December 18th, and it is being presented in stereo. This is another album that I don't own a copy of, never have, and I would say hasn't really ever been something that I've wanted to own a copy of or that I've sought out. But let's kind of talk through that because I have heard the music, and so let's kind of talk through this. So the album was originally released in 1958. And the lineup is as follows. So you've got Carlos Duran, Luis Miranda, Manuel Duran as well. I don't know if he's related to Carlos. Bayardo Vallerde or Valerde. You've got Brew Moore, and then you have, again, Cal Tjader. So this was put out on OJC in the past in 1991, and nothing since then at all. So if you look up this on Discogs, the last update you're going to see in terms of a reissue was in 1991. So if there's one that in this release calendar that I'm the most skeptical about, it is definitely this one. All right, so let's get into some of the reasons why with a little bit more specificity. So one of them is that there seems to be an echo that was either added on or created somehow in the studio that's been overlaid onto some of these tracks that make them sound like easy listening to me. And it's difficult for me to separate some of the negative connotations that I have with easy listening sound with the tracks on this album. So that's one thing. The second is the piano doesn't seem to have been very well captured or presented, at least in the versions that I've heard, like the streamed versions. And I think it's especially apparent on tracks like Invitation and September Song. So I'll be curious to hear how the piano sounds, I guess, on this latest edition. I will say that there are certainly some great moments here. The track "A Lover Come Back to Me" has some excellent Latin rhythms with Brew Moore soloing over them and offering the melody. And in general, the tracks that Brew Moore takes more of a sort of commanding, has more of a commanding presence on are the standouts for me. But there's a lot, it's almost like alternating between some of these that sound very easy listening and those that are a little bit faster and a little bit more exciting. And in effect, there's almost an element of sameness across some of the tracks where they're basically taking the same tempo with a very similar rhythmic backing, and I just get a little bit sleepy. And it isn't because I don't have an ear for this style of music. In fact, I was in an Afro-Cuban band for several years out of college, and I played a variety of Latin styles. I think it's a combination of again the rhythmic element, how it's similar, the tempo is similar, the sort of overall sound is with sort of the sleepy vibes. Also, the tracks are relatively short, and so there's just a lot of tracks. I don't know. Those are some of the things that have made me a little bit sort of leery of this album, but it's not like I've owned an original or even a reissue to really get an experience, I guess, with the album. So some of this is a little bit my perception, not necessarily founded in truth. But as always, with all of my discussion on any of these albums, don't listen to me. Go and preview some of the tracks that I've referenced and see if it's something that you enjoy. So that's it, the OJC calendar for 2024. I hope this was, helpful in some way, at least gives you a sense of what's coming up. This is as if you didn't already sign up for the newsletter or the emails, right? That come through and hit your email box whenever there's an announcement, because that came out like yesterday. So if you haven't signed up for that, you should go over to OJC or Craft and make sure you're getting those notifications. Not that I don't want you to pay attention to these videos. So anyway, yeah, like I said, hopefully this was helpful. The ones that I'm most excited about probably go without saying. It's going to be Blue Mitchell's Blues Moods, and it's going to be Mal Waldron's The Quest. That doesn't mean those are the only ones that I'm going to get, but those are definitely ones I'm going to get. So anyway, that's my opinion. Thanks everyone for tuning in as always, and I'll see you next time.